Hi everybody, welcome to week 7 of our LAI 514. Today's presentation will be on the reading we have for this week, entitled Alternatives to Grading Students' Writing, edited by Stephen Tuccitti. There are 3 chapters we will be discussing today. Number 1, What Grades Do for Us and How to Do Without Them, by Marcy Baldwin. Grading on Merit and Achievement, Where Quality Meets Quantity, by Stephen Atkinson and Stephen Tuccitti. And Unlocking Outcome-Based Education Through the Writing Process by Rick Pribble. Each of these are separate articles on different methods to grade without slapping on a letter grade. So let's start with Chapter 1, What Grades Do for Us and How to Do Without Them. Before we kind of talk about a method to get rid of letter grading, we've got to talk about what happens when we letter grade. What happens to the student when we letter grade? Number 1, Baldwin says, writing is seen as a task to get a better grade. Not to learn anything, just to get a better grade. Number 2, writing is seen as a demonstrative act, not a communicative act. This is just a way for teachers to see if they're getting better, not really a way to actually portray what they're thinking and what they want to bring across to the audience. Number 3, writing is a process that has some end, where some achieve and some do not. And number 4, writing is for a grade only. How many of you have experienced such feelings when you were a student in a writing classroom? And is this what we want to be portraying to our students? So what do grades do for us as teachers? Number 1, they help us motivate students. Would you write a paper or some kind of research if you were not motivated by a grade? I know as a student I probably would not have. So how can we motivate? There are 4 things that Baldwin suggests we can do to motivate without a letter grade. Number 1 is freedom to choose. Allow the students to choose what they would like to write about, what they would like to explore. Number 2, give them some kind of challenge. Sit down with each of them individually and set standards, set goals for them to achieve. Number 3 kind of ties into the first one. Give them control. Let them choose. Let them help, set the standards, set the goals. And number 4, let them collaborate. Collaboration between students is very, very important. The second thing grades do for us as teachers is give feedback. I do have a question. When you were in school, did you look at the feedback written on a paper, or would you just look at the grade? I know for me, I would just kind of look at the grade first, and then once I was going to get around to rewriting the paper, I would look at the feedback to see what the teacher wanted, what I had to write. So the first thing that we can start with is unaccompanied feedback. Give feedback on how to make the paper better without slapping on a letter grade. Feedback, Baldwin states, is the tone of feedback is influenced by the grade that's on the paper. So if you give a C and you write, here are 3 ways you can make it better, you got to do this better, they'll take that feedback as justification for the grade that you gave them. Students see feedback and comments as justification for the grade rather than how to improve in the future. So feedback unaccompanied by a letter grade can then be taken in the spirit which is intended. Such feedback is given even in speech, just like the example in the paper where the mother is correcting her child's syntax. She's not saying, oh, you got a B because you said this wrong. She's just modeling how to do it better for next time. So each paper can be a building block for how to be better the next time. The third thing that grades do for us as teachers is they evaluate and reward. Giving grades to reward is actually very cruel. Students are put up against the entire class, and their progress is not monitored individually from where they started to where they ended up. Students need to know that there are standards, but they need to set their own standards for themselves. And if this, obviously students aren't going to want to write, but if you can sit down with each of them and talk about kind of what they want to explore, and what standards they want to meet up to that are obviously within reason of the class, that can be very helpful. Also, learning from each other, peer review. Peer review can be very helpful. That can spark conversations between students that otherwise might not happen in a classroom if you were to say, okay, raise your hand if you want to talk about something. Another thing that I kind of wanted to mention is my discipline is music education. Piano was largely my instrument in my undergrad and my grad. And what we did was kind of like a peer review, but it was kind of like a peer performance, where we would hire in a master from either Eastman or one of the other high-up conservatories, and all of us piano students would all get together and we'd have a piece to play in front of this master, and they would critique us and yell at us and all those great things. And all the other students, we'd all be able to sit around and kind of watch that and kind of pull from each other's performances and what the teacher was saying to the other person. We could kind of apply to our own piece. And that was super helpful to me. It was embarrassing, obviously, and you kind of cringe a lot, but it's kind of a music thing, as there's so much competition. But that was very, very, very helpful to kind of apply things that the master was telling other students to my own performance. So I have a question. Do you think the students benefit more from being critiqued by their peers in a group, or do you think that's considered the blind leading the blind? I've heard kind of both sides to this argument, and I believe, from my experiences, it's more beneficial to be critiqued from peers. And what do you think of the master class idea? That's something that could be incorporated into a writing class. Kind of just throwing that out there. And lastly, replacing grades with learning. Baldwin suggests remove letter grades totally. Allow the students to take more control of their writing, and allow the students to be part of the critique and evaluations. Kind of let the students be kind of on the same side as the teacher. Moving along to the next chapter, Grading on Merit and Achievement, Where Quality Meets Quantity by Stephen Atkinson and Stephen Tucci. The first thing they propose here is achievement grading. Achievement grading is described as a means of grading where higher grades are awarded to students who dig deeper into ideas and topics than their peers. Grading is a pass-fail, credit or no credit, and credit is given based on the quality, the thoroughness of one's work, and the quantity, the amount of work completed. So it's very, very independent. Students are given a number of assignments to be completed in a certain amount of time, and letter grades are given based on the quantity. So the teacher does have some structure, but students are allowed the freedom to do as they wish. A's are given to those who go above and beyond, B's are given to those who achieve most of the assignments and who attend and go into depth, and C's are given to those who do not even try. Students are given more liberty to work on the things that are in their field of interest. Without grades, students are more apt to take risks, go out on a limb, and try different and interesting things. Determining credible and non-credible work. This is something, obviously, every teacher has to think about because we have to give a grade at the end of the year. So credibility is determined by the teacher and by the student together. This is done individually so the teacher can be attuned to the individual context and not just give blanket grading to all of the students. This puts the student on the same side as the teacher, and both can evaluate the work. But before embarking on a project, the teacher and student can assign tests and measures so that the student can achieve something, and there is some kind of structure. I do have a question. Would this type of grading break down a large classroom? Would this just be kind of for the small classrooms, for the higher classmen? Questions posing possible complications to this method. These were talked about in the article. Number 1, how is a wider range of work leading to higher grades? How does greater depth avoid vagueness? What about students who opt to get a lower grade? And what about crash work? And I believe this method would strictly depend on what students you have in the class and how big the classroom is. Obviously, if you have a classroom of 30 kids, you can't do this with each kid. But if you had a small classroom and individuals who were motivated, I believe this would work well, as the students are able to pace their own work. So what do you think? Would you give this method a chance? The one that we previously talked about. Do you think this would work in a classroom? And the final chapter. Unlocking outcome-based education through the writing process. Outcome-based education, or OBE, is defined as the function of which aims to provide all students with the necessary tools for future success. So this writing process is called the Accept, Revise, Evaluation. Okay, this monitors individual progress from the beginning. All writing is turned in from pre-writing to the final copy, and the teacher is then able to go through each and view the progress to see if the student has made individual progress from the beginning. So it's based on the student's individual progress. So revise. If the student is below average for the individuals and occurring problems in the papers and numerous mistakes, student revisit with a 10% decrease. Reject is if the students have failed to complete the required parts, failed to revise, the student that needs to start from the beginning. Acceptable is where there is the best possible progress for the individual student from the beginning. So again, this is based on individuals. In this method, everyone continues at their own pace, so there are those who are farther ahead that don't have to be, held back, waiting for others to catch up, and there are others who are farther behind that don't have to be dragged along to catch up with everybody else. In this method, the student is very responsible for their own success or failures because they have ample opportunities to be the best possible. So the writing process, we talked about accept, revise, and reject, and it's all based on individual progress. So again, this might not be the best method for a very, very large classroom, but I think it could be tweaked where students are put into different groups and worked with. So testing with this accept, revise style. Students, he believes, must have experience with the material, reading and writing and presenting before they can even take a test. All exams become the accept, revise, and all tests must meet 75%. If the student does not meet the 75%, they must go back, study, and retake. But in order not to be unfair to those who did well in the first try, students who had to retake would need to first complete a sort of ticket, whether it was a paper or report or an oral exam, to show that they had studied and were in fact ready to review the paper. Also, some tests were allowed to be open book, but page numbers were required to show that the student were reading and working. So what about failing and incomplete grades? Students do not fail because of intelligence, they fail because of not doing the work. This was written by George Gustafson. The author of this paper uses this quote as a basis when taking into account final grades of passing and failing. Students who did not turn in all the assignments received an incomplete. They then had 2 weeks to finish every missed assignment for a reduction in grading. If they failed to do so, they received a final failing grade. The responsibility was then put on the student to finish all of the work and inquire after any assignments that still needed completion. So, in the end, what we really need to know, what was the success rate of this method? Does this work? This method was pioneered in a high school writing class, and only a handful of students received an incomplete, and only one received a final failing grade. And those are the numbers to be exact. With this method, students are based on the progress they have made from the starting point in the year. They are driven to learn to write, not by grades, but how much they can achieve from their starting point, as well as not receive that incomplete. Afterwards, student testimonies in the article said they felt more prepared to take on writing challenges for the future. Because they were attuned to individually, they felt a whole lot better about what they could do in the future. So what do you think? Do you believe any of these methods would work in your classroom? Would you be willing to try any of them? I felt like a lot of these methods would really only work in smaller classrooms with higher classmen that really put their mind to it. But what do you think? Do you think any of these methods could be tweaked to use with younger students? And out of all these methods discussed in the presentation, is there one that appeals to you as being the most effective, or one that you might use in your classroom? Thank you so much for watching this presentation. I hope you have enjoyed it, and comment below. Thanks so much.